So what are we going to be covering today? So at the end of the year, as system administrators, there's can generally be a lot of planning for 2018. There's a lot of OpenAir specific checklists or things that need to be done to get ready for the next year and closing out 2017. So what we wanted to cover today is just kind of going through some of the things that we've seen from our customers that they have requested our assistance with or been responsible for, and also some of the things that we do for our own system as we get ready for the new year. So we'll talk through some of these items. Some of these will pertain to you, hopefully, and some of these may not, but hopefully you'll find some benefit to seeing how some of these other customers are using OpenAir. So one thing we always recommend with our customers is, at the end of each month-end close, we recommend a checklist to going through all the different items. It's no different for year-end. So having a year-end checklist, because obviously there's so much time between one year-end and another, it's really easy for you to forget what items need to be reviewed to make sure that everything is ready to go for the new year. So having a checklist is a great way to revisit that list each year, make sure you're ready to go and haven't skipped anything or anything fall between the cracks. And it will avoid you having some last-minute scrambling when you get into the new year. So a checklist is something we always recommend, not only monthly but also for annually. Oops, excuse me. Here's some of the things that we see from customers. Work schedules. So everyone's familiar with the work schedules. Within a work schedule, you store the holidays. Depending on how many holidays you're putting in, generally customers are putting in holidays on a year-by-year basis. So you'll want to make sure that your 2018 holiday schedule is entered into the work schedule, and that way when you start to report on utilization and availability in the new year, you will have those holidays baked in to those reports. Counting periods. So in OpenAir, having the ability to open and close accounting periods on a monthly basis. A lot of customers create accounting periods in advance for the current year. You'll want to make sure that your accounting periods are built for next year as well. So go in and add those 2018 periods. And then PTO balance. So we have a lot of customers that are using OpenAir to manage PTO. And so we'll talk about some of the items that come up with updating and configuring and cleaning up PTO for the current year and getting ready for next year. Also, we'll talk a little bit about some of the configuration and reports you need to be aware of, or at least alert your users to not use certain reports based on the configuration. And something we don't see very common, but it is used, and we do have a number of customers that do use custom time ranges. And so this could be used for fiscal periods reporting, where you create fiscal months. If you do 445 type of months, those custom time ranges are valuable for organizing your reports. And we need to make sure those are also built for the new year so that your reporting is good. The work schedules we talked about, this is where we need to have those holidays in as footnotes, and also using those when we go into reporting around utilization and forecasting based on scheduling events. So putting those 2018 holidays in, entering a 0 for the amount of available working hours, so that way it gets removed from the expected work calendar. And so you have that accuracy from a different, and obviously some of you may have multiple work schedules for potentially different countries, making sure that all the local holidays are updated for 2018. We talked about accounting periods. So this is basically the equivalent of posting periods in your financial system. It allows you to open and close periods so that you can report on commonality. This is often used when you're using revenue recognition in OpenAir, where you're having to wait for all the month to end to get all the time in so that you can compute your revenue. We want that to hit the right accounting period, so when we do reporting, So making sure that you're opening and closing your monthly accounting periods, but also setting up the next year's accounting periods for future month-end closes is important. And then PTO balance maintenance. So, year over year, a lot of customers will change the way that they are potentially computing PTO. So are you calculating your delay or expiration of PTO correctly? Do you need to go in and any sort of manual adjustment, either positive and negative, for the new year? So you can, obviously you can set up your accrual rules and you can date those so that people, as they meet their yearly anniversaries, depending on your PTO policy, that those are automatically flowing and balances are shifting between rules. But if you do have any changes in your PTO program from one year to next, it's important that you go in and make those adjustments into OpenAir so that you get that accurate PTO reporting. A couple of call-outs around reports. A lot of customers use YPD Reports, which are great reports showing year-to-date information. Obviously, when you cross into January, year-to-date reports become very unuseful. So you may want to just alert your teams that or adjust the reports as needed if you want to do a rolling 12 months instead of YTD at the beginning of the year. Or any sort of adjustments or communication you want to put out, so folks know if there's very popular reports that are doing, YTD calculations, that those reports really won't become very useful until you generally get out of the first month, because generally it's transaction-based reporting, which won't be generated till after the end of the month. So just kind of an alert, potentially an adjustment as you go forward with these YTD reports. And we talked about custom time range. The most common usage is the fiscal year. So this is where you can go set up your different years if you're not running a calendar month, and making sure that you have those time frames set up. And there's also some other benefits to custom time ranges. You can have some special setup to allow you to actually combine past, current, and future in the same report, which is one of the things OpenAir doesn't intuitively do out of the box. So you can have that, and then make sure that those are being adjusted with 2018 dates. So make sure all those custom time ranges are being configured and set correctly. So again, some things to consider as you're thinking through for next year. We talked about any PTO policy changes. We want to make sure that those are reflected in OpenAir. User promotions. A lot of companies go through year-end and they may use different promotions where an analyst becomes a senior analyst or a consultant becomes a senior consultant. If you're tracking that sort of title inside of OpenAir at the user level, you'll want to make sure that the OpenAir is reflective of those updates. Also, if you're using user entity tags to track those promotions, where you're using date ranges, where I was an analyst for 2017, but I'm a senior analyst for the 2018, going in and then historically tagging those different changes, or if I'm moving from one department to another, or however you may be using your entity tags to track those dated. Are you using target utilization in OpenAir, and do those need to be adjusted for the new year? So this allows you basically to set target utilizations and then be able to report on target utilizations across the organization at an individual level, and these are really effective reporting, and we need to make sure those are adjusted. Cost of living, so adjusting any costs. We'll talk a little bit more detail about cost adjustments. This is something that we do in our account where we track targets for the year, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. But obviously, if you're doing any sort of future targets for either revenue or billing, there's some there's some adjustments that'll need to be made there. And then if you're doing any sort of reorganization, management changes, we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, if you're managing PTO and you're adjusting your PTO policy, then certainly there's work to be done in OpenAir. You can create new rules or adjust the existing rules, making sure people have the right rules, and so forth. So we've kind of hit this a couple of times, but this is a big one for year end if there's changes. Promotions, as we spoke, are people moving from one job code to another, or one department to another? Is there a year-end cost change being made at an individual level for some sort of cost of living? Or do you just want to change your other cost calculations, which we'll talk about? And a lot of companies also store default bill rates. So if I'm an analyst, I'm expected to bill at $150 an hour. Well, if I have a cost change or a job code change, then does my bill rate need to be updated for the next year? So that's another place where you'd want to make an adjustment. Target utilizations are generally budget-based, so we expect our resources to be 80% billable, which is going to give us our budget for the year. We're going to increase that this year to 82%. So we want to go in and make sure we update everyone's target utilization for the next year. So this is where you would go in, you could potentially go into each individual and change the target utilization to add dates. You can also update target utilization using the Integration Manager tool to do a bulk update. Just be careful and make sure you test your updates, because the Integration Manager, as most of you know, can be a little tricky, and make sure you test your first load on a small amount of records to make sure it's working as expected. Cost. So this is the most common, I would say, where we see customers making changes at year end, where salaries are changed or just general costing needs to be updated. Generally, we see from a costing where you could have individual salary-based costs specific to a user. You could have a single blended cost across the entire organization, which is just for approximating a flat cost. Or you could say where all our project managers cost X and our developers cost Y, so we have a more of a banded cost by the role on a project. So any of these are very valid reasons, very valid ways of tracking costs. And as you know, within the costing in OpenAir, you can go in and you can adjust historically what the cost was and set the current cost. So the historical cost would then get set for 2017, and then the current cost would get set for 2018 costs. And that allows you then to be able to report across years to be able to get an accurate cost. There's 3 levels of a cost that you may take advantage of. So depending on what levels of cost you're using, you may have more than one adjustment to make across those. Make sure everyone is on board with any cost rate adjustments, that the calculations are in line with the accounting and finance team. And so that's important. If you're doing any sort of cost adjustments, so we have a lot of customers that are taking cost adjustments on a month-to-month basis, where they'll go in and run a percent utilization, historical utilization report, and it'll look at the number of hours entered. And if you worked, 170 hours in a 160-hour month, and your cost was $100 an hour, it will actually flatten your cost to be able to get your actual cost for the month. And so if you're doing any of that, you can continue to do that. You would need to redo the current cost to move it to a back cost, because all those costs are automatically stored. You would just need to update the current cost, and the next time you do an adjustment, it'll take into effect a new cost for starting January 2018, and it'll use that. Cost values can be quite tedious for updates, usually because it takes so many clicks to get to across however many users in your organization. So we do a lot of cost manipulation for our customers, again, using Integration Manager. There's some trickiness to updating costs. So there's a loaded cost table that you would want to export out and manipulate and then upload back in. So there's a little bit of trickiness. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you with any sort of bulk cost and adjustments. Revenue billing targets. So this is something we do. A lot of companies have these, but they may not necessarily be tracking them in OpenAir. So what is our target revenue by month? So we created an internal project, and we created a series of revenue transactions that are tied for the target for each month. And what that allows us to do is then use that target project against our actuals, and we create custom calculations to store those as separate values. And so then we can report on month over month what was our target versus what was our actuals, and it allows us to then be able to graph, how are we doing against our goals for the year or any given month. So it's a really effective, nice way to be able to see actuals versus the budget at a top-line perspective. Obviously, if we're doing that, we need to go in and put in our 2018 budget for our revenue for the year so that we can continue our reporting without interruption there. So some of the reorganization that we see customers run into, department changes, cost centers, managers, approval processes maybe are changing. You may be adjusting hierarchies within your organization that you want to reflect in OpenAir. So a lot of these types of changes are made year over year. So if you're going through any of these little reorganization, make sure that you understand the impact of OpenAir and that you are adjusting OpenAir to reflect the new reality so that you have accurate reporting. You can also have different, effects, not just on users, potentially on projects and clients. I have one customer I'm working with right now that's changing the way they report on projects. So we're going through and we're doing a mapping exercise and then updating all the projects with the new categories so that for 2018 they have the new reporting they need to see. And that's something we're working with them on. So that's certainly something that you'll want to take a look at for your organization. Again, Integration Manager with the normal caveats. It's important to understand what you're doing and make sure that you are very controlled in the way that you test your upgrades, uploads. A couple of cautions around cost centers. So cost centers look like standard drop-down fields on projects and users, and then they can be visible on billing rules and other areas of OpenAir. Just be aware, a cost center is not a typical field. It's actually a transactional field. So if I've got a project with a certain cost center and I decide for 2018 this cost center, this project is going to change to a different one, you want to make sure you don't make that change until 2018. Otherwise, you're going to have some data cleanup because every time someone enters time against that project, that time is inheriting the value of the cost center. So you'll have, if you change the cost center today, all time entered between today and the end of the year will reflect the new value, not the old, and thus you will get some incorrect reporting. So make sure that as you are working with cost centers, and this is also effective, same thing with services. If you're using services and you're changing your service catalog potentially, it's important of the timing that you do with when those changes are made so they're reflected accordingly. So what are our New Year's resolutions? Hopefully everyone's been keeping up with the release management. As everyone knows, OpenAir comes out with 2 releases a year, which is for the last few years, and the releases are chock full of different features, some beneficial, some not. and every organization needs to really make sure they pay attention, because there could be that one release item in there that solves that one pain you may be experiencing. So we have a lot of customers that we work with on releases to help make sure that we understand the release, that we look at the release from their perspective, and that we make sure that we let them know what they could benefit from and document that for our customers, which is a real benefit for them. Also, look at your system administration policy for OpenAir. Are you prepared for 2018? We have a lot of customers where we become, TopStep becomes a secondary administrator for the account. So we're the administrator's administrator, where we can support your administrators. We can do bulk uploads or report support, or all sorts of things that you can't get through OpenAir support, but we're happy to do through our outsourced administration. So we'd love to talk to you if you're interested in beefing up your administrative support for 2018. If you're on this call today, then you are an active user community member, and we applaud you for your investment in OpenAir and TopStep. So keep up the great work. We have LinkedIn OpenAir user groups. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to schedule our local user groups for 2018. So we hope to see you at one of those. Those are great ways to meet other OpenAir administrators and users and power users, and I'll learn from each other. TopStep's happy to facilitate those, and promise you everyone walks away with new information, at least one nugget of new information. The webinars. The webinars we continually get good feedback on, so we're excited to continue those for next year. So look forward to seeing you guys on the future webinars. We also record these and store these on our website, so as you know, if you missed the webinar, you can go back and grab those and listen to those for 2017. We are doing weekly tips. We do those on, you probably noticed those in LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook of all places. So we're happy to continue. Our goal is to provide information to the OpenAir user community. Hopefully you find some of these valuable. So we'll continue to do that. We have an ebook that we generated a few years ago. We're going to update that for 2017 and 18 with some of the latest release items, and we'll make that available through our website starting next year. So if you're interested in our ebook, it's very inexpensive, but it does give you a load of information, especially from an administration. And if you are participating in the user community, then you are eligible for a discount. So if there are release management or outsourced administration or any sort of work that TopStep can help you with, please mention that you are a participant in the community, and we're happy to give you a discount on any services that we provide.